Tom Harkin understands that we're in a fight here. We're in a fight not just for the public option. We're in a fight not just for universal health care. We're in a fight for the soul of this country. We're in a fight against the forces of reaction in this country that we've been seeing time and time again recently. We're in a fight against corporate power, the fight that Fighting Bob La Follette gave his life to. We're in a fight against empire. We're in a fight against Cheneyism. We're in a fight against Palinism, God forbid. And it's nice in such a fight to have a guy like Tom Harkin in your corner. Tom Harkin is a fighting liberal, and that's the only kind of liberal we need right now. Here's Tom Harkin.
Okay. It's good to be back. Can I go out and come back in again? That was a great reception. Thank you all very much. And what a great crowd. It's great to be back in Baraboo for the Fighting Bob Fest. This is my 4th time. I missed it last year. I was up for re-election and didn't make it last year, but I remember I was here 2 years ago and frozen my rear end off. It was so cold. So I brought a coat and everything else today, and now look at it, would you? Well, after having been through August, I want you to know this is my kind of town hall meeting right here today. How about those raging grannies, huh? Well, I'll tell you this, no one's going to pull the plug on those grandmas. Well, thank you, Matthew, for that very kind and generous introduction. My association with the Progressive, as you know, goes back a long way with Irwin Knoll and so many others. He just told you a little bit about those tiger cages. You know, all these people that were in these tiger cages and were dying and abused and beaten and tortured. Of course, when we exposed it, well, when I was there, the Vietnamese government and our government were saying, oh, these are just communists. These are just communist people. That kind of stuff. I remember the colonel who was in charge said, the Vietnamese colonel said, oh, these are bad people. He said, they won't salute the flag. He said, they won't even salute the American flag. Well, what the hell, they're Vietnamese. Why should they salute the American flag? Well, it was interesting enough, in 1995, I went back. First time I'd been back. 25 years later, we had a 25th reunion of the prisoners who'd been in the tiger cages. And I was invited into the mayor's office in Saigon, which is now called Ho Chi Minh City. So I was invited to meet the mayor. I said, fine. So I went to meet the mayor, and I sat down, and obligatory pictures, and he told me his story. He said, you don't know this, but I was in the tiger cages when you were there. But he said, I was down at the end, and you never made it to the end. But I heard all the commotion going on, and when you left, a lot of us thought that was it. We were all going to get killed. But because of the international uproar and the pictures and everything, they were forced to release them, and now he's mayor of Ho Chi Minh City. And so there's happy endings sometimes. And the young man who drew me the map was a student leader at the time, and the students would not go back to school until he was released. Well, there was a lot of pressure put on them, and so they released Nguyen, Loy. I call him Loy, L-O-I, Loy. They released him, but he kept his brother there. And they said, if you say anything, we'll kill your brother. But for some reason, he had faith in me, and he drew me the maps, and I was able to find them and get them out. Just this summer, our oldest daughter and husband and grandkids live out near Los Angeles. And I went out there, and Loy and his wife came over, and both of his daughters are graduates of the University of Southern California, and they're doing well, and now he's a grandpa, and you know, it just goes to show you, you can't always believe what your government tells you. They tell you, oh, these are bad people in our government. You just can't believe everything the government tells you. Ed Solowski, thank you very much for driving me up. Of course, I miss your father, and I hope he's going to be okay. And to my longtime friend Ed Garvey, God, 30 years maybe or more, I don't know how many years. I just want to thank Ed Garvey for keeping up this great tradition and getting you all here every year. Now, Ed, I've just gotten an interview back here, I don't know exactly who it was with, but asked me about, is this important to get people together like this? I said, yeah, because a lot of us that are in the progressive movement, we're not paid to do these kinds of things, We have our lives to live and our jobs to do and our kids to raise and our families to take care of. And we're out there doing things in our communities and stuff. And I said, it's extremely important to get together in a gathering like this every so often, to connect with one another, to support one another, to encourage one another, and to let let each one of us know that we got allies all over this country in the progressive movement. So thank you, Ed Garvey, for providing us with this opportunity. And of course, I wouldn't be able to say anything or do anything here in Wisconsin unless I just pause for even a few seconds to remember Midge Miller. What a wonderful, wonderful human being, Midge Miller. Gonna miss her, especially the emails. My computer hasn't crashed since. She always sent me these wonderful emails. You've got to read this. You've got to read that. And I'm busy. I'd line them all up. Every once in a while I get them. I just print them out, and then I'd take them with me on the plane and read them. But she always had wonderful things to send to us. I don't know if Mark is here or not, but oh my gosh, Mark! Thank you very, very much. My goodness sakes, Mark Miller, right here. Thanks. And let me say at the beginning, I'm sorry I got to run after this. This is my weekend of the steak fry. I had this annual steak fry. It's the 32nd, and it's tomorrow, but then we have a dinner tonight, and my speaker is Al Franken from Minnesota coming down. So, in fact, it wasn't the last time I was here. A couple of times ago when I was here, I had to rush out of here again because I had a speaker at my steak fry. This would have been in 2005. I get confused, 05, 06. Maybe it was 06. It was 06. I had a guy by the name of Barack Obama came and spoke. I shouldn't get into these stories, but you like them. What the hell? So I went to Barack. He's on my committee. He's on the Kennedy committee. And so I asked him if he'd come speak at my steak fry. And he said, well, I'll think about it. At least I know about it. Let me think about it. And a couple of days later, he came to me and he said, Tom, he said, I don't think I want to speak at your steak fry. I said, why not? Well, he said, a lot of people are pushing me to run for president. And he said, I'm not there yet. He said, I'm not there, but if I go speak at that steak fry, that's all they're going to talk about is me running for president, and I might get pushed into doing something I don't want to do. Well, I said, okay. So I thought about this for 30 seconds. Then I went to Dick Durbin, Senator Durbin from Illinois. And I said, Dick, let me tell you what just happened. And I said, it seems to me there's another way of looking at this. That if Barack is ever even thinking of running for president, here he can come out and speak at my steak fry, stick the finger in the wind, see how all those white folks take to him out there in Iowa. You got to test the water. And so Dick said, let me talk to him. So a couple days later, I see Barack again. He comes up to me and says, hey, Tom, he says, that invitation still open? And I said, well, yeah, it is. I haven't gotten anybody else yet. He said, well, I said, I think I'd like to do it after all. And so the rest is history. He came out and blew him away. And before I say anything else, let me just say how great it is to be in the home state of two terrific senators, Herb Kohl, Russ Feingold. The great governor, Jim Doyle, your lieutenant governor, Barb Lawton, and of course, Tammy Baldwin and Gwen Moore, who are going to be here later today. I also want to make it clear that Ed Garvey is not paying me a dime to give this speech. Well, I say that because I feel obliged, because you may have seen that our old friend George W. Bush is on the lecture circuit for $150,000 a speech. Well, actually, it's $150,000 a speech, and for an extra 25 grand, you can throw your shoes at him. Actually, after conducting a bunch of town hall meetings in August, I kind of started sympathizing with old George. Nobody threw any shoes at me, but it was just about as bad listening to the angry right-wingers shouting about death panels and how I wanted to pull the plug on Grandma. I said, hell, I'm married to a grandma. What? As I listened to some of the more outrageous charges by these wingnuts, I couldn't help but remember Will Rogers saying. Will Rogers once said, "The problem isn't what people don't know. It's what they know that ain't so." And boy, do they know a lot that just ain't so. But over the summer, some of our Republican friends, folks like Governor Mark Sanford of South Carolina, and the former governor, Sarah Palin of Alaska, they did their very best to lift our spirits. It's just a kind of a steady stream of nutty things. I mean, can you imagine being governor of a state and thinking you can sneak off to Argentina for a week with your mistress and convince people you were really hiking the Appalachian Trail? Can you imagine being the governor of Alaska and getting into a public spitting contest with a teenager? Levi Johnson, you know, the guy who was so happily engaged to Palin's daughter, at least until the day after the election. I'd call it soap opera, but if you submitted this to Days of Our Life, they'd never believe it. I've always been a fan of Jeff Foxworthy's, you know, you might be a redneck jokes. You've heard those, right? You might be a redneck if you keep a can of Raid on your dining room table, that kind of stuff. Well, after listening all summer to the Republicans' demagoguery on health reform, I think it's time for a new set of these. You might be a Republican, like this. You know, you might be a Republican if you stand up at a town hall meeting and shout, "Keep your government hands off my Medicare." You might be a Republican if you believe that the government is always incompetent, wasteful, and stupid. But on the other hand, we can't have a public option in healthcare because it would outcompete all the private plans and run them out of business. You might be a Republican if you know that health insurance companies employ whole armies of adjusters to deny claims and stiff policyholders. But you're against reform because you don't want a bureaucrat standing between your doctor and the patient. You might be a Republican if you oppose President Obama's, quote, evil plan to keep people healthy, but you support the GOP alternative plan, which is summed up in 5 words: pray you don't get sick. Well, I could go on, but you get the picture. And there's too much at stake to allow all the scaremongering to go unchallenged. So, my friends, it's September. Congress is back in session. And we've got a health care reform bill to pass and get to President Obama's desk before we go home for Christmas. And it's time to stand up and fight for what we believe in, including a strong public option in that health care reform bill. And as we fight for reform, we can take our inspiration from a truly great Republican, Robert Marion La Follette, right here. A lot of you don't know this, but not only is he one of my all-time heroes, but get this. I am privileged to sit at the same desk that he used on the floor of the United States Senate. And let me say this about fighting Bob. It's no coincidence he was a great progressive and a great fighter. He fought the railroads, the banks, the trusts. The very nature of progressivism is a fight against entrenched corporate interests, entrenched economic privilege, entrenched political power, and in this day, a fight against the know-nothing ditto heads that are all over this country. The ditto heads, yeah. The Limbaugh people, the Limburger people. The powers that be, including the health insurance companies, will never give an inch without a struggle. So it's not enough just to be progressives, my friend. It's not enough. It's not enough to be on the side of the angels and have our hearts in the right place. We've got to be progressives who know how to fight and are willing to fight. Frederick Douglass was a great freedom fighter and a great progressive, and here's what he said. I know you've heard it before, but it bears repeating. Those who profess to favor freedom, yet deprecate agitation, are men who want crops without plowing up the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its mighty waters. Well, today, historic health reform is in the balance. We progressives, need to be the thunder and the lightning. We need to be the awful roar. Now, we've all been saddened by the death of Ted Kennedy, a great friend, a great progressive, a great leader on so many issues that go to the heart of what kind of a nation we are, what kind of people we are, how we extend a helping hand to those in the shadows of life. I've been privileged to serve on his committee for 22 years. As you probably heard, Senator Chris Dodd was next in line for the chairmanship, but he chose to stay as chairman of the Banking Committee. So on Wednesday of this week, I have succeeded Senator Kennedy as chairman of the Health, Education, and Labor Committee. It's a daunting prospect, but it's a great challenge and a great opportunity to now pick up Ted's torch, to carry on his fight for the things we believe in, including access to quality, affordable health care, get this, as a right and not as a privilege of wealth in our society. Now, we've had some skirmishes. We got our bill done in our committee, in the Health Committee. But the big fight is coming, my friends. The big fight is coming. I never asked to be put in this position, but I got to tell you, I love it. I am going to lead this fight, and we're going to win this fight, and we're going to get that health care bill done. We're going to get it to Obama. Well, I'm going to do it with people like Bernie Sanders, who's here someplace, going to be here today. You know, I like being a fighting progressive. That's been my whole history. One of the things that the Library of Congress certified after my last election said that I had now defeated more sitting Republican members of Congress than anyone in U.S. history. It hadn't been easy, folks. These have been tough battles. Tough battles. But I'm still convinced as long as you're strong and you stand for good progressive causes. Me and Paul Wellstone, we used to always say to each other, you know, I'd rather have 40% of the people who were strong with me, who were there through thick and thin, no matter what the weather. I'd rather have that 40% than to have 65 or 70% of the people say they kind of like you. Because if I got that 40% that's rock solid, good progressives, I'll fight you for that 11% and we'll win because we can out-organize you and we can out-mobilize you. So we got a titanic battle in the next couple of months. And let's be clear what we're up against. And you've all heard about these death panels. Well, I want to tell you there really is a death panel out there. It's called the Senate Republican Caucus. And they will do whatever they can to kill health reform. So we're up against the same old Washington special interests, the money, the greed, the power. I call them the ultimate pre-existing conditions. They have killed every attempt at comprehensive health reform going clear back to Harry Truman. The status quo isn't working for tens of millions of Americans who are underinsured, who have no insurance. But it's working just fine for the health insurance industry. Despite the recession, they raked in nearly $16 billion in profits last year. The large drug companies are making huge profits. One of the issues people always bring up, they say, how are you going to pay for this? How are you going to pay for it? I think a lot of people are scared we're going to raise taxes and all that kind of stuff. Well, you know, Willie Sutton had it right. He robbed banks because that's where the money is. We ought to go where the money is. Listen to this, folks. Just last week, 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago, Pfizer, largest drug company in the world, just settled for $2.3 billion. $1 billion to Medicare and Medicaid, the largest criminal fine in U.S. history. And as the court said, that was the fourth time in 10 years that they had done this. $2.3 billion settlement. Now, Ed Garver here, he's a good lawyer. And he can tell you people settle because they're afraid they're going to get dinged more. So they thought, oh my God, we better sell for $2.3 billion. Because they were defrauding Medicare and Medicaid. Just this year, Pfizer owed Wisconsin $9 million for defrauding Medicaid here in Wisconsin. In 2004, Warner Lambert pled guilty to 2 felonies, settled for $430 million. 2006, GlaxoSmithKline, another large pharmaceutical, $14 million had to pay to California. 1999, Hoffman LaRoche pled guilty, paid $500 million fine for Medicaid fraud. Folks, you want to save money? Let's give Medicare the authority to bargain with these drug companies to get the prices of drugs down for the people that are in Medicare in this country. I mean, we do it in the VA system. Veterans Administration, the cheapest drugs in this country. My wife and I just took a little trip up to Canada. Not only should we give Medicare the authority, and I'm telling you, we're going to work on this. I'm going to try to put this in this health reform bill. We tried it twice before, just in the last 5 years. We failed both times, but we got fairly close. But we can't give up now. It's time to hold the pharmaceutical companies' feet to the fire and make them bargain with Medicare just like they do the Veterans Administration in this country. And I'm going to get to the insurance companies shortly here. So I say it's time to fight. When I say fight, I don't mean shoving and shouting, and I sure don't mean strutting around with a gun on your hip. What I mean is organizing and mobilizing, energizing. Let me state the obvious. When 47 million Americans don't have access to a doctor if they get a serious disease, when many Americans consider themselves lucky to get makeshift treatment in livestock pens. Listen to Wendell Potter today. Listen to what Wendell Potter has to tell you about that. He's an expert. He comes from that industry. When you know that, then you know we got to fight. But we also need to reform to protect people who have health insurance. Obviously, there's more people in this country that have health insurance that don't. But I don't know what it's like in Wisconsin, but I know in Iowa, the single biggest cause of bankruptcy in my state are people who get a chronic illness, and guess what? They run up against that lifetime cap, and they can't pay, and they file for bankruptcy. Across the U.S., nearly 62% of bankruptcies are linked to medical bills. And here's the kicker. Nearly 80% of those people actually had health insurance, but it failed to pay the bills. As I mentioned, health insurance companies employ whole armies of claims adjusters who routinely deny requests for medical tests and procedures. In fact, they get bonuses. We know that. Ask Wendell Potter. They actually get bonuses for denying coverage and saying no to policyholders. This is outrageous. People shouldn't have to go to war with their insurance company to get it to pay for cancer treatments or life-saving procedures. But it happens all the time, and guess who usually wins? Well, conservatives give us all this scare talk about a government bureaucrat standing between you and your doctor. Right now, we got insurance bureaucrats who stand between you and your doctor, and those bureaucrats earn good evaluations and bonuses for denying you coverage. The system is rigged against you. I was at a town hall meeting in Mason City. It was the last town hall meeting I had in August, and pretty contentious. A lot of talk about this bureaucrats getting between you and the doctor and all that kind of stuff. Town hall meeting was just ending. There was a guy in the front row who had been kind of quiet, been raising his hand, and I hadn't called on him. And I violated my best judgment. Usually you don't want to call on someone like that when you're ready to leave. But I called on him. And it was just serendipitous. He said, I've been a doctor for 37 years in family practice. And in those 37 years, he said, I can honestly say, I have never had one government bureaucrat come between me and a patient on Medicare or Medicaid. But I can tell you in those 37 years, I have had hundreds of insurance bureaucrats come between me and my patients in trying to help them out. So here's the deal. All of these insurance company abuses would be banned by the reform bill that we passed in our Senate Health Committee. And that's exactly why they're out there trying to kill it. Let's be clear about what our reform legislation would do. It bans health insurance companies from denying you coverage because of a pre-existing condition. It bans health insurance companies from dropping you coverage when you get sick, which happens all the time. They can't put an arbitrary cap on the amount of coverage you receive in a given year or in a lifetime. Insurance companies will be required to cover with no co-pays, no deductibles, routine checkups and physicals, preventative care like mammogram screenings and colonoscopies. No co-pays, no deductibles. You'll be able to keep your kids on a family plan until they're age 26. Yeah, I kind of like that too. And our bill will ensure quality, affordable health insurance for every American with a strong public option. Now, why do we need a public option? Well, first of all, our public option, the rates and the coverage would be set by the Secretary of Health and Human Services. No big fancy buildings, no corporate jets, no $16 million a year CEOs, no profit motive. You can take it anywhere in the United States, no matter whether you're working, you're not working, you can move, no matter where you are, you have that same public option coverage. So it does two great things. It backstops and makes sure that everyone can get affordable, quality coverage. And secondly, because we won't have to pay those CEOs and the corporate jets and the big buildings and stuff, we can have a lower rate and we can keep a check on their obscene profits that they're making in the private insurance sector. Now, as we saw in the town halls, there are people out there who oppose any health reform. Many simply want to bring down President Obama. And some of them just simply hate what we stand for as progressives. So we've got to have the courage of our convictions. We've got to be like Franklin Roosevelt when he was running for re-election in 1936. And In a speech in Madison Square Garden, he talked about those who had attacked him for passing Social Security. He said, and I quote, "We had to struggle with the old enemies. Never before in all our history have these forces been so united against a president as they stand today. They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred." Franklin Roosevelt, 1936. We got to remember that the powers that be didn't give us Social Security. Progressive had to fight for it. They didn't give us Medicare. They didn't give us the 40-hour work week, overtime pay, workplace safety, or the Civil Rights Act, or the Americans with Disabilities Act. We progressive had to fight for every single one of those to get those through. So progressivism to me is a fighting faith. A fighting faith. The story about the guy who was not a Catholic and he went to the boxing match with his Catholic priest friend. And they went there and the bell rang and one of the fighters, a young kid, came out of the corner and blessed himself. And the guy who was not a Catholic, he turned to his friend, the priest, he said, "Father," he says, "what does that mean when he makes that sign like that?" And the priest said, "Well, it doesn't mean a darn thing if the kid don't know how to fight." Franklin Roosevelt understood this. Harry Truman understood it. Paul Wellstone and Ted Kennedy and Bernie Sanders and Tammy Baldwin and Gwen Moore and Herb Kohl and Russ Feingold, they all understand it, and you and I understand it too. So let's get to work. Let's fight the lies and distortions. Let's educate. Let's organize. Let's mobilize. Let's energy. We've got one big job that we've got to do. Franklin Roosevelt, one time, was besieged on some legislation. He said, "I know it's the right thing to do. Now go out and make me do it." One of the things, my friends, that we've got to do as progressives here is we got to make sure that President Barack Obama doesn't go wobbly in the knees. I mean, I know this guy. I know him. He served 3 years on our committee. I know what he believes. I know what he stands for. But I also know the powerful forces that surround a president of the United States. I know what goes on down there. So it's our job to make him do it. It's our job to show him that the vast majority of the American people want a public option, and they're not going to put up with a health care bill that doesn't have a public option in it. So, I thank you all. Thank you for having me here again. It's a beautiful day. Thank you for your progressive work here and across America. Now let's go out. Before we have Christmas, we'll have a health care reform bill with a public option that covers every single American in our country. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.